Bible. This is in the Bible.
Of course it is.
This is in the Bible.
Are you aware that there were 15? Now let me ask you something. Are you aware that there were 15 other major religions? This is history now.
Okay.
Not conjecture, history. There were 15 major theological religious movements in the world before Christianity that taught exactly the same identical story of a Messiah who came to the earth, who was born in a manger, who died on a cross, who had 12 apostles, who died with a crown of thorns. Are you aware that there were 15 major religions that had the same identical teachings of Christianity? Most people aren't. And I'm very suspect of a 16th religion, which is copied off of 15 previous religions, and I am told that this one is the truth. I become very suspect. That's the way I am as a teacher.
Now, although I like Jordan Maxwell, there are certain aspects of Jordan Maxwell that I disagree with, which we should all be that way with anybody, with everybody. You should not never agree 100% with anyone, because not everything that I say or he says or anybody says is going to be 100% accurate. And then as time goes on, things that are said today may not be as accurate when we find out more information. Now, Jordan Maxwell is completely correct when he says that there was at least 15 other major religions that had not the exact story, but similar stories. That's where my disagreement first comes with this statement that he made here, but that it had very similar stories. And I'm only going to focus on the Levant area, or areas that those people would have had actual contact with other people. So that would go into the Indus Valley, go into upper Africa, Northern Africa, as well as East Africa, the entire Mediterranean area, to which these stories have very similarities, that they derive their own story that you now read in your Bible. So Jordan Maxwell, great teacher, definitely. But to say that those were the exact same stories is not true. But they do have similarities. So for instance, in the story of Horus, in the birth of Horus, what you do have is that his father, Osiris, had been tricked by his uncle, Seth, into getting into a coffin. When he got into the coffin, Seth killed him, and then he dismembered Seth, because Seth wanted to have Isis, his sister. They were all brothers and sisters. Wanted to have Isis as his wife. So he dismembered Osiris. Then Isis goes about a journey of reconstituting Osiris's body, bringing him back to life. And then when he is resurrected, the only thing that was missing was his penis. It was either thrown in the Nile, or it was thrown in the Nile and consumed by an alligator. You have two different variations of the story, of that portion of the story. So then she took an obelisk, which you see in graveyards. You see the Washington Monument. Those are all obelisks. You see them in many town squares. She took an obelisk, used that as his penis, and then she hovered above it. So she wasn't a virgin, and it wasn't a virgin birth, but she hovered above his penis, and then of the replacement for his penis, and she became pregnant with the child Horus. It's not a virgin birth, but it is a miracle conception. It is an out of the norm conception. It is something very different. It's on a different spiritual plane of conception, which then gives similarity to the birth of Jesus. In the same way that you have the birth of Dionysus, you have the birth of many different beings, Hercules, who was born because the primary god Zeus came and had sex with a woman. So like the god of the Bible have sex with, that spirit has sex with Mary, and then she becomes pregnant. Now, I know y'all don't want to use the term sex, but you got to have some sex in order to have a baby. So these stories are very similar, not exactly the same, but if you're writing your own story and you're basing it off of other people's story, you're going to make subtle changes to your story in order to facilitate this false narrative, or for creating your own religion. And this is what we have with the biblical version. The same thing, Krishna having 12 disciples, Horus having 12 disciples, things of that nature. Horus raising people from the dead, Krishna raising people from the dead. These are all borrowed stories or motifs that were used in order to create your Jesus narrative. And because of those things, where I do agree with Jordan Maxwell here, is that these are the things that create doubt in the 16th variation of this story. A gentleman last night on the live asked me, when was that magic moment where I just said, I'm done with Christianity? And I explained to him, although there were major points, it was still a growth path that I went through in order to walk away from Christianity. Which is for those people who keep on saying, why don't you talk about other religions? Because I was never part of the other religions. That's why. So let me just answer that and leave me alone about it. But it does create doubt. And when I studied those mythologies and studied those stories at a deeper level, I came to realize that the biblical story takes motifs from other stories. So why should I accept this biblical story as the true and correct story? Now, many Christians may come on here and start to say that, well, and this is a made-up doctrine. There's actually, you have no proof of this. You have nothing that could validate this. This is just a doctrine that came out and people have gravitated towards it. And this mainly through the Protestant movement, that the devil came in as Horus. The devil came in as Dionysius. The devil came in as Krishna. The devil created all these stories that he knew was going to be the Jesus story in order to deceive people and make them think that the Jesus story is a made-up story. That's renegotiating history and other people's religion in order to facilitate your belief in the religion to which you believe in. You have nothing in your scriptures that tells you that. You have nothing in history that actually tells you that. Because if I expanded it beyond the Mediterranean, Near Asia, North Africa, East Africa area, you have similar stories that have the similar motifs that you can find in the Aztecs and Mayan stories and everybody else who had zero contact. So this is more of a human mental creation of having gods have sex with humans that people just believe. Now, you could extrapolate that since the Sumerian story talks about the Anunnaki creating societies all over the world, and that Anunnaki civilization would have perpetuated a similar acts all around, that could validate it. If you don't use the Anunnaki, you can say that when Atlantis fell, that since the Atlanteans went and had colonies all over the world, that the Atlanteans would have created similar stories with all the people because of a similar culture. We don't actually have proof that Atlantis ever existed, but you can extrapolate those things and say that, well, it originally started with those people, which is far older than your Old Testament, New Testament stories. But that mindset is a world mindset. And I think that that's the main thing, is that humans, no matter where they were going to come up with a similar story. And that story just perpetuated itself around the world. And this is why there is considerable reason to have doubt about about Christianity, about the Old Testament, because they're just retelling a motif that seems to be ingrained in human culture, or there was a previous ancient civilization that went around the world reestablishing human cultures after the Younger Dryas flood around 9 to 12,000 years ago. And because they all came from one society, that they would have implemented similar activities in all societies. And that's why the majority of societies in the world have similar stories, which doesn't make any of them actually true stories. So y'all have a great day. And remember always, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.